They're not good enough to start. They're not even good enough to play. But they do talk a good game. So come join Lou and Jose from the sidelines where all the best sports discussions happen anyway. Welcome in to the Benchwarmerz podcast.
Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ujiri. That's Jose Ortiz. And this is the Benchwarmerz podcast. Wherever, whenever, and however you happen to be listening, we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to spend it with us. We will try to make it worth your while. We had a big first hour. We talked all about the NBA playoffs because that is the most exciting thing in sports right now. The Western Conference far more than Eastern Conference, but any playoffs is better than no playoffs. And coming up a little bit, a lot of NFL talk, but we do have one more piece of NBA news to talk about, and that was the NBA draft, which almost went a little bit under the radar somehow last week. When it was underway, and we have the 2020 NBA draft lottery results. Minnesota getting your number one pick, Golden State 2, Charlotte 3, Chicago 4, Cleveland 5, and on from there, Atlanta, Detroit, New York, Washington, and Phoenix rounding out the top 10. And right off the bat, Jose, I guess the best news about the Golden State Warriors getting the second pick is that they didn't get the first pick.
So I am praying right now for the NBA that the Warriors don't take James Wiseman, who's a center, because if you look at their roster, they don't need a point guard or a shooting guard, assuming that Klay Thompson and Steph Curry come back healthy.
Yeah. You
already have Draymond Green. James Wiseman, he dominated in college or for 1 year as a center, 19 or basically 20 points a game, 11 rebounds a game. That's the worst thing that could happen. I see a lot of mock drafts have the Warriors taking LaMelo Ball, which I feel bad because I don't want to connect him to Lonzo Ball or to his father. But I just have a bad taste in my mouth, and I want nothing to do with drafting any Ball on my team. I know that sounds weird to say it that way, but yeah. I want nothing to do with him. I feel so bad about it. So I'm just like, if I'm the Timberwolves, I'm looking at James Wiseman. I'm looking at other players. Anthony Edwards is kind of the guy that people are saying that they're going to take. The one thing that stands out to me in this draft, at least at this point, it could be because there was no NCAA tournament for a guy to kind of be on my radar. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like there's this big time franchise player coming out of this draft.
Yeah, and I think everybody kind of gets overshadowed by Zion this last year.
Yeah.
Because, he's just an electric, guy who is going to be. If he stays even remotely healthy, he's going to be the face of the NBA, probably with Luka for the next foreseeable future. LaMelo, as far as LaMelo Ball is concerned, I agree that having his father coming in and making all that kind of noise is not something that you want. But I will say that that's not the biggest issue for me with the Golden State Warriors. I think that the Golden State Warriors are sort of a very strong organization. Steve Kerr obviously commands respect, and from the top down, they kind of just are a good, well-run organization. So they could handle a bit of, barking from Mr. Ball, I guess. But, the Lakers, when Lonzo was on the Lakers, it felt like he just inflamed that entire organization. But any team with LeBron is going to be the center of every controversy under the sun and just be, scrutinized for everything. So I feel like that amplified.
He's coming out saying Lonzo Ball's better than LeBron James and Steph Curry.
Right.
It's just setting the expectations way too high. That's why his son is probably considered a bust right now.
Yeah.
When if he just kept his mouth shut, maybe we would be looking at it in a different lens right now. I don't know.
Yeah,
he has been pretty quiet recently, though.
The other issue I see with LaMelo Ball going to the Warriors is the bigger issue is that he's either playing the one or the two.
Yeah.
So how does that work? You already have Steph and Klay, who are probably going to go down as the best backcourt in NBA history. So where's LaMelo fit in? What do you have? You have him play a three? He's 6'8" and 180 pounds. So I don't know what you do with that.
I guess there could be worse things than having him play the three. I agree with that. You don't want to make that pick. Now, the Warriors are in a position where they can just draft the best available player because they're going to be bringing back Draymond Green, as you mentioned, the big three from years ago for them.
Yeah.
So they're going to be bringing back a great team that won 73 games just a few years ago. So they're in a position where they can just draft whoever they want to draft, and it's like, hey, we can wait for 2 years for this guy to be actually be good. But what I'm worried about is them drafting a starting center that would just all of a sudden, now when you start double teaming them, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on the outside, now you just have a center who just goes and just dominates and dunks. And it's not Andrew Bogut or whomever they had in there. So, yeah, that's my biggest worry.
And it would be somehow sort of poetic that the team that basically destroyed the center position in basketball would be the team to bring it back and resuscitate it and resurrect that position by virtue of the same way that they killed it, is that, that outside shooting. And that, I mean, to back up your point, I mean, that strategy is disturbingly dangerous because you have those two guys on the outside, so you can't double both of them and have a good big man down low. I mean, so you could be trading a 3-pointer for a 2-pointer, but I mean, how many times can you do that before you lose the game? I mean, that's.
And then also when Steph and Klay start getting hot, because Steph, unlike other 3-point shooters in the league, these guys are really high efficiency. Yeah. So when they shoot a 3-pointer, it's like, oh my goodness, they shot a 3-pointer. Like it's scary.
Yeah.
Where other teams are like, oh, please shoot the 3-pointer. Them, you don't want them to shoot the 3-pointer. And so once they start getting hot, you kind of have to start creeping out a little bit closer when you're defending on the inside. And then all of a sudden you hit him in the post. And if he's got good footwork, there's not going to be anything you can do against him. It's just going to be it could be a deadly combination. The only other thing that stood out to me in the draft when I first looked at it is that somehow Boston has 3 first-round picks again. I don't understand. I would never trade with Boston anymore. Like anytime, if I were an NBA GM right now, and someone says, "Oh, Danny Ainge is on the phone for you," hang up immediately. I do not want anything to do with a trade with Danny Ainge because I know he's going to win.
That's how I feel when Jerry West comes calling, because Jerry West has just notoriously just ripped people off. And yeah, I think, I mean, the biggest one that comes to mind obviously is Kobe. When they traded Vlade Divac for Kobe Bryant, and look how that turned out. I mean, I think Danny Ainge and Jerry West are on that same level of efficiency, and the Celtics might be the best run organization in the NBA. I mean, I know we talked about the Warriors, but I mean, I think the Celtics are right up there with the Raptors and the Warriors.
Yep. I was going to mention the Raptors, besides Jerry. Yep.
And so if you're the Timberwolves, I mean, what do you do? Do you take LaMelo? I mean, do you do that? Because I mean, they have D'Angelo Russell that they got. They have, I don't know who's the other starter. I think it's
Karl Anthony Towns is their big player. So to me, once again, and I feel bad because I'm sure maybe LaMelo Ball. Now it would have been different if I got to see them play in the tournament. I really wasn't paying that much attention to college basketball in January, so I don't really know much. I can't go back and be like, oh, look at what he was doing. I maybe have to look at some tape. I'm taking Anthony Edwards. He seems to be the consensus number 1 pick. He went to Georgia. He's a freshman. LaMelo Ball played international basketball. So we wouldn't even have seen him in the NCAA tournament. So I just don't want anything to do with the Ball family anymore. So I would be taking Anthony Edwards, so that's the thing. You can't take James Wiseman if you're the Timberwolves. You already have a center in Karl Anthony Towns. Right. So you kind of have to take Anthony Edwards.
I mean, on the flip side of that, I mean, you can look at the Sixers with Joel Embiid and Al Horford as proof that that's true, or you could look at the Lakers who have Dwight Howard and Anthony Davis, and they're somehow making it work. So I'm not sure. I don't know who would take a back seat there between those two guys. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns, I think, is a little more impressive than Dwight Howard has been as of late. Cool. So it's not quite the same situation, but I mean, I guess it could work with the Timberwolves. I don't know that it's.
I think with the Timberwolves, since they're not in a position to win next year, at least I don't think so. Yeah, they're probably better off just taking the best, whoever they feel is the best player available. Like don't draft for need. Don't say, oh, we have a whole. So if they actually think that James Wiseman is the best player in the draft him, because you're not one player away. You're not drafting a guy and then I don't think Luka Doncic is out here. So you're not drafting a player and all of a sudden making yourself a playoff contender. I don't think. So just draft the best player available and move on.
Yeah, and the only other news we touched on when the NBA, that was Brett Brown gets fired and Nick Nurse wins. Nick Nurse wins the Coach of the Year award. Very deservingly so, yes. Yep. So we're going to move on to the NFL and other breaking news. So we're just going to stick with the news for now for the top of this hour. And there's a whole host of NFL news to talk about, and nothing mind-bogglingly shattering, but some headlines for sure. Earl Thomas is the first thing that comes to mind. Earl Thomas was released by the Ravens, and this is disturbing if you're, I guess a Cowboys fan at this point who seem to be looking at the Earl Thomas, because they wanted him, I think, before he went to the Ravens last year, or he wanted to go to the Cowboys, or it was a mutual thing, but he ended up with the Ravens. But it looks like, the Ravens and the Seahawks are both two of probably the best run organizations in football, and they've both cut ties with Earl Thomas, and it's starting to look a little troubling. I mean, Earl Thomas had that very infamous, I don't even know what to call it, encounter a few months ago with, you can look it up. I mean, we're not going to the details, but it was his brother, and there was girls in bed, and they were in bed together, and it was a whole, his wife found him through Instagram, and it was
pulled the gun on him.
Well, yes, and almost killed him. Yeah. And so that does not bode well for Earl Thomas. And while he's arguably he was the best player on that Seahawks defense when he was there, it seems like he's kind of turning into sort of the defensive Antonio Brown in a way.
I don't understand why guys just don't shut up and play. I don't know. Maybe I'm just, listen, I'm not a professional athlete. I've never really been a high-level athlete in organized sports. So maybe there's just something I'm not seeing or I'm missing. There's context that I'm not getting. But it just seems like a lot of players have all these extra things going on. And to me, it's just like you have maybe a 5 to 10 year window to play in the NFL if you're lucky. Just shut up and play. Yeah. Like now, if I'm looking at Earl Thomas, I'm looking, well, obviously you had unceremonious exits from two teams. Now I'm going to bring you on my team and expect something different. Now, of course, he's going to get signed somewhere because we think he's a good player. We think he's only 27, 28 years old, so he's still young enough. It does call into question his character and the quality of a teammate that he is.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, it's sort of that Antonio Brown look where there were two sources, I think, that told, I think it was CBS Sports, and they said, one source said, quote, "This has been coming for a long time. Guys have been frustrated about the situation since last year, and it was only getting worse. He had to go."
Man.
And then another source said, quote, "Easily the most disliked guy in that locker room," unquote. And, obviously it's a little, you take it with a grain of salt when it's anonymous sources instead of...
And they're also kicking him out the door, so,
Right. So it's hard to, piling on a guy like that is probably easy to do. But, it doesn't look, it's not good, especially because he did make the Pro Bowl last year. So, I mean, we always talk about that, the talent versus trouble scale. And, he was an exceptional player last year for the Ravens. And even with all that, they still gave him the boot and said, "Sorry, man, you gotta go." So it's not good.
They were willing to get nothing for him too. You got to think about that too, where you have a valuable asset and you just cut him. You didn't, and you're going to try, and they're going to try and get the $10 million back from him. I think that they would have owed him or not something. They're going to try to get the money back.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's a problem there. So we'll see.
But so moving on, speaking of safeties, a guy by the name of Budda Baker, who I will admit I knew precious little about before this. And, after looking up some of his stats, I kind of feel silly for having to admit that. But Budda Baker signs a 4-year, $59 million contract with the Arizona Cardinals. And damn, this makes him the highest paid safety in NFL history, I believe.
Yeah.
And so this is yet another proof positive that rookie quarterback contracts are the gateway to football dominance, because the Cardinals are making moves and they're not wasting any time. I mean, obviously they signed DeAndre Hopkins, they signed Kenyon Drake, and now they're tacking on their defense with Budda Baker, who is now the highest paid safety of all time.
I mean, I also think it's a factor of you have a guy in his third year who just had a career year, and if you don't, do you want, because they don't have a fifth-year option since he wasn't a first-round pick, so you only get him for 4 years. Right. So do you want to let him go in free agency? You are right in the sense that they don't have a lot of money committed to Kyler Murray, and they're trying to maximize their window right now. But part of maximizing that window is keeping players that are really good. So if you're, for example, I'm in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs paying Patrick Mahomes, because not only because he's great, but because you want to keep a winning culture there, or a winning team there. We haven't seen it from Kyler Murray. I know you already said that you think he's better than Dak Prescott, which is ridiculous to me, but we'll get to that another time. But
we'll watch next season. We'll see.
Well, yeah, we will see. But I mean, it's in 2 or 3 years, I imagine Kyler Murray is going to get paid too anyway. I just think if you have a good player on your team, it's better to pay him than to roll the dice with a draft pick. Unless you don't plan on winning.
Right. Which is the only other thing that I thought about this situation is Budda Baker being, he had 147 tackles last year. I mean, that's just stupid. Yeah. 43 assisted tackles. I mean, he didn't have any interceptions, but 147 combined tackles. Who cares? I mean, he's just crushing people.
Those are linebacker numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And with that in mind, what made me kind of chuckle was that, another guy that sort of fit the same scenario where you have all world level safety and a rookie contract for your quarterback. So you have money to pay him. You have a great guy to keep building around on the defensive side of the ball. And once again, the New York Jets decided to just kind of get rid of Jamal Adams and, just further proof that maybe Adam Gase and that organization is they just can't get it right. And it's, I think the Cardinals are proving how to do it, and the Jets are still just showing us how not to do it.
I mean, just in fairness, in defense, because you're right, Adam Gase is just awful. He's terrible. But in defense of the Jets, Jamal Adams was, begging to get out of town. It wasn't like, Budda. We haven't heard anything from Budda Baker. We hadn't heard any noise about him requesting more money or wanting to be traded. It was all of a sudden Budda Baker gets paid, right? So it's a completely different tactic. I think that has something to do with it, where you're just keeping everything in house. You're not leaking things to the press and tweeting things or doing whatever it is that players do now to try and get attention. Budda Baker was very professional about it, and he got rewarded. I think the Jets are also in a little bit different position, where when you look at the Arizona Cardinals, their arrow is pointing up. I don't think we could say the same thing for the Jets.
No, but I think that, just to counter that, I think Jamal Adams started off by just saying, hey, I want an extension. He wanted money. He wanted just to get paid first. And then when the Jets kind of scoffed at him, then he started kind of making rumblings and saying, this place sucks, basically. So he did try to just say, hey, let's go here. I want to get paid because I'm awesome. And he was right. And he's, we'll see. I mean, I think, to say the least, Adam Gase is on the hot seat.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Absolutely.
And speaking of that comes to our final question we kind of got to talking about, which I want to touch on. We're going to take a quick break, and then I want to come back and talk about this. But I think Adam Gase would be the coach that is the most on the hot seat this year, if you ask me.
Or Matt Nagy. But he's in that. Yeah. Adam Gase definitely.
I feel like Matt Nagy kind of had a pass because he wasn't the sole reason that they took Mitch Trubisky. I think if anything, what he's done with Mitch Trubisky has bought him more time.
Yeah.
Because it looks, he's playing, from behind basically most of that Mitch Trubisky's career. So we're going to go through quarterback, one running back, one wide receiver, one tight end, and one defensive player on who we think is on the hot seat in the NFL for the 2020 season. So stick around, and we'll be right back on the Benchwarmerz podcast.
You can reduce your risk of COVID-19 by cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched items and surfaces every day. These items include remotes, tables, counters, light switches, doorknobs, handles, toilets, and sinks. Wear disposable gloves to clean and disinfect. If you can see that the item is dirty, wash first with soap and water or another general cleaner. Then use a household disinfectant to kill germs. Follow manufacturer's instructions for application and proper ventilation to safely use the product. For phones or other electronics, follow the manufacturer's instructions for cleaning and disinfecting. If no instructions, use alcohol-based wipes or sprays containing at least 70% alcohol. Dry surface thoroughly. For more tips, visit cdc.gov.
And now back to the Benchwarmers podcast with Lou and Jose.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm Lou Ruggieri, that's Jose Ortiz, and this is still the Benchwarmers podcast. We appreciate you taking some time and spending it with us today. Hopefully you've learned a little something in the 2 hours of show we've had. We touched on all the Western and Eastern Conference NBA playoff games in the first hour. We talked a little NBA draft and some NFL news earlier this hour, and we touched on it right before the break with saying, Adam Gase being the coach that I think is most on the hot seat in my perspective for the NFL in this upcoming season, and that sort of led us into talking before the show about which players are on the hottest seat for this next season, and we decided to just kind of take one quarterback, one running back, one wide receiver, and one tight end. And Jose, I wanted to start off with your quarterback and see who, because I was torn between two guys, and I'll say these first, and I think I'm giving it to Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
Because it's his, it's put up or shut up, and I think that this is his final year. I think an honorable mention for me was Derek Carr, but I think Derek Carr might have one more year to prove it.
And there are actually a lot of quarterbacks. I actually thought about Josh Allen for the Bills as well. But yeah, no, it's certainly Baker Mayfield is probably an easy. Yeah, that was no one say easy, but that was kind of like the guy at the top of my list. But I'm just going to keep stumping for the guy that I've been fighting you over for the last few months. Dak Prescott. He wants to get paid.
Yep.
He doesn't want to just get paid. He wants to get pizzade. He wants to get
he wants
lots of money.
Paid. Yeah.
Yeah. He wants to get lots of money. And the bottom line is he put last year he had a career year, almost 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. But before that, he was good, but he wasn't great. And he needs to put up a better season this year. So he had 4,900, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He needs to probably be, or maybe it's unrealistic to say over 5,000. So maybe around the same yardage. But it's got to probably be around 35, 36 touchdowns, under 10 interceptions, and probably over 65%. He's got to be in the MVP discussion.
Yes.
And I think at least one playoff win, and probably needs to get to the NFC Championship game. I mean, one playoff win probably would be enough, but I think getting to the NFC Championship game after having a great regular season would kind of put that nice icing on the cake, because no one's going to kill them if they lose to the Seahawks or they lose to the 49ers or lose to the Saints in the NFC Championship game. I think right now everyone believes those three teams are better than the Cowboys.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be a crime for them to lose to one of those teams. But, if you go to the first round, lose to the Cardinals, or you go to the first round, lose to whatever team that's not one of those three, it's going to be a disappointing year.
Yeah, so. And I think both of these quarterbacks that we have, Dak Prescott and Baker Mayfield, both have basically the same scenario where they have more talent around them than arguably maybe any other team in the league, except maybe Tom Brady.
And Patrick Mahomes.
And, Mahomes too, But I don't know. I think that arguably I could make a case that the Browns and the Cowboys have better skill positions from top to bottom. Obviously, removing quarterback from that equation. But
and tight end.
Well, I mean, Travis Kelce's better than anybody that Dallas has. Or, I mean, Austin Hooper. Yeah, Travis Kelce's better.
Come on now.
Yeah, but the receiving core, I mean, Tyreek Hill versus Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham.
That's fair. That's fair.
Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and
I think Tyreek
Amari
Hill's the
Cooper.
best receiver out of the entire group, but after that, I would say advantage
They have
everyone else.
Hardman and it's
Sammy Watkins, Hardman.
Sammy Watkins is the other one.
Yep.
But Baker Mayfield last year had he had a subpar season. He had a stellar rookie year, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and then he regressed. He had 22 touchdowns and 21 interceptions. I mean, that's you can't do that again. And so, that being said, I think my receiver, I don't know if you want to do receiver running back next, but my receiver sort of touches on it's the same team, this guy we just mentioned. I think Odell Beckham Jr., it's put up or shut up, man. Like this is it. We know, and here's the thing. He doesn't need to necessarily put up numbers because we've seen him with numbers. We've seen him on the Giants. 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,300 yards. Then he got hurt. He had another 1,000-yard season, and then he basically had the same season with the first year with the Browns. I think that Odell Beckham needs to show that he can be a team player. I think he needs to show that he can play a role and show up when they need him to, and then when he doesn't, keep his mouth shut. And he's going to be the linchpin for Baker Mayfield because if Odell has a great year, odds are Baker's going to have a great year too, and vice versa. So I think those two are inexorably tied together in this. I couldn't
agree more. Not only does he need to be a good team player, I actually think he has to have a great year because if you go another season now, I don't know. I think last year, time he had a good year was like 2016. But if you go another season now without having a great numbers, is it fair to wonder that maybe it was Eli Manning and not you? Like when do you start wondering, well, what was going on? Were those numbers fluky? Like what's the problem? And one of the things I dislike about Odell Beckham Jr., which keeps him kind of out of that top 10 discussion for me, is he does really difficult things incredibly well, like catching one-handed passes, making catches in traffic. But just like the normal simple things that you need receivers to be able to do, it seems like he doesn't do those things well. And that's the issue. And so he just needs to be better overall, top to bottom. He was actually going to be my first choice. Mm-hmm. And then I thought about another guy who's maybe in a little bit different situation, A.J. Green.
Yeah.
A.J. Green hasn't really been an elite football player since 2015, the last time he was over 1,200 yards receiving.
Yeah.
The math, that's 5 years. That's a long time in the NFL. That's 5 years ago, I didn't even know I was going to have a son, right? So that's a long time in the NFL. It's a long time in life to go without being really an effective player. They franchised him this year, so he's going to get $18 million. He's already dealing with injuries in camp, so this is not good.
Yeah.
But he's looking for another contract. He's looking for that one last contract, whether it's a 2-year, 3-year contract. He's looking to show that he's either still a number one wide receiver, or B, a high-level second wide receiver on a team. And he needs to have a great year. I mean, that's it.
I think, he's sort of hamstrung as a Bengal, and not just, again, we talked a little culture last hour with the Sixers. I think the Bengals kind of have that same culture. And Joe Burrow, I mean, as good as he looked at LSU last year, I think is going to have his hands tied, with this COVID season. I think it's going to be tough for him to really get over that hump and change that culture in one season. Even if all things went well, I think it'd be tough for him. But AJ Green, when he's at his peak, I mean, he's top 3, top 5 wide receiver in the league easily. But
we just haven't seen him there in a very long time.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's starting to wonder, like, maybe he's not ever getting back there.
Yeah. And so with that, my running back that's on the hot seat, actually, and it's funny how these guys all kind of tie together in some way, shape, or form. But my running back is Saquon Barkley. And Saquon, I think, his first year, his rookie year, he's Pro Bowl, 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns. I mean, he's crushing it. Last year, I mean, he had 1,000 yards, so it's good. It's not great, though. And keep in mind, I think he was the number 2 pick overall. And so that's where the pressure comes from, because a lot like, Mitch Trubisky or Baker Mayfield, when you're in those top 3 spots, big time draft pick means big time expectations. And Saquon Barkley was taken number 2 overall in an era when running backs are not valued very high at all. And it was thought that he was kind of be the next Barry Sanders. And he looks like he has the potential to be, but maybe it's he's going to be a product of how well the Giants can work as a team. And that offensive line has improved a bit and needs to improve from last year. But I think that if he has one more kind of subpar, mediocre season, I think it's that bust talk is gonna creep up, and it's gonna be tagged. He's gonna be tagged with it.
Well, I think he's far from being a bust. I agree that he's on the hot seat.
Talent-wise, no, he's not.
Yeah,
but I think that his production is on the verge of being bust-worthy.
I mean, this is his 3rd year, and so you're right. He needs to have a big season to kind of validate that first season, right? Because the first season was like, oh my God, he's amazing.
Yeah.
And then last year was like, oh, well, he's a little injury prone. The durability issues, right? You want these guys to be able to go 15, 16 games a year. And when he's not able to do that, it certainly makes you wonder if you want to invest in him long term. That, to me, is really what it boils down to. He's going to go into his 3rd year next season. What is the trend with every running back? After their 3rd year, they want the big contract.
Yep.
Well, if you want the big contract, you've got to put up big numbers.
Right.
And that means that's not, oh, he got 1,000 yards rushing. That means he got close to 2,000 yards from scrimmage or over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. That means he was dominant. That means that he was a workhorse. They gave him the ball. He didn't get hurt. He was stayed on the field 3 downs, and you had some team success, even if it doesn't necessarily mean winning a championship or something like that. Just knowing that he's going to be there and he's going to be part of the success, he absolutely has to have a big year. Completely agree.
Yep.
So my running back is not nearly the same situation, but Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
Looking at him, he spent 2 years ago, held out, wanted all this money, wanted more money than anyone really thought he was worth, holds out for an entire year, signs with the Jets. Last year, now, in fairness, the Jets kind of had, once again, they have Adam Gase, worst coach in the NFL. They had, the whole mono situation with Sam Darnold. But still, Le'Veon Bell averaged 3.2 yards per carry. That's pedestrian.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that I could do that because I don't want to disrespect the NFL, but average running back.
This is called the Benchwarmerz podcast. Just to get back down to earth a little bit. We're talking and not playing for a reason.
Yeah. I need to have some humility, though. No, that's what average running backs. Peyton Barber can do that for you. You don't need to pay Le'Veon Bell. What I think he's getting $13 million a year, $15 million a year, so he can give you 3.2 yards to carry. And the other thing that is just makes him more of a hot seat, if I'm not mistaken, they can cut him next season for very little cap room damage, or dead cap damage. So if he puts up another so blah season, he's probably going to get cut next year, and I don't know if teams are going to be lining up to sign him.
I agree with everything you said. I don't think anything needs more to be said. So, if you want to move on to your tight end?
So my tight end is O.J. Howard. Okay. He was a first-round pick out of Alabama 3 years ago. Everyone had kind of big expectations for him, which happens when you have a tight end, but he hasn't really done much. And last year, he barely even was on the field, where they're playing Cameron Brate over him. And when you think about it, Jameis Winston had 5,000 yards passing, and O.J. Howard really didn't have a great season. Now you have Tom Brady in town. There's not really any excuses. Tom Brady loves throwing to his tight end. I've been reading about just the training camp for the Bucs right now. O.J. Howard is running in the first team. He's running ahead of Cameron Brate, running ahead of Rob Gronkowski. So if he's going to be out there, whether it's in 2 tight end sets or as the number 1 tight end, I just feel like if you don't produce this year, when can anyone expect you to produce?
Yeah, I mean, O.J. Howard, I remember when he came out, they talked about him as just a physical freak, and he basically had all the tangibles that you could possibly want. 6'6", 242. He's fast. He's strong. He's big. He was supposed to be this just world-beating guy, and he just has not produced for one reason or another. I mean, 4.5 40. So I mean, he's pretty quick, and for a guy that big, and yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it's put up or shut up, because there was rumors that they were going to trade one of those guys earlier in the offseason, but it looks like they're going to hang on to them. And I think for Tom, that's a great. I mean, you could have a 3 tight end set, and I mean, if you remember Tom Brady, Aaron Hernandez, and Rob Gronkowski, I mean, they were crushing people with 2 tight ends, and so now you have 3 of those guys. My tight end, however, I was torn between 2 guys, and the guy I'm going with is Eric Ebron. And Eric Ebron got traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, and he has, if Ben Roethlisberger can stay healthy. Obviously, if Ben gets hurt, I kind of have to give Ebron a pass, depending on who the backup is, unless they bring in Colin Kaepernick, like I've been saying they should for a year now. But Eric Ebron had, he's had potential. We keep hearing about his potential. He spent all those years on the Lions, 2014 to 2017. He had one good year in 2016 where he had 700 yards and 61 receptions. And then 2 years ago, Andrew Luck, when Andrew Luck got a legit tight end, he had 750 yards and he had a league-leading 13 touchdowns, receiving touchdowns.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, he was crushing people. And then last year, obviously with Jacoby Brissett, he had a subpar year, 375 yards, 31 touchdowns, and only 3 touchdowns, or 31 receptions and 3 touchdowns, excuse me. So I think that we kind of give him a pass with Jacoby Brissett, but this year on the Steelers have a great defense. Their offense, they need a guy like him to show up. And if he doesn't, I think that's it. I don't see him really getting another chance.
Yeah, he might be out of the NFL if he doesn't produce.
My honorable mention, by the way, was Hunter Henry.
Oh my goodness! Well, you were in my brain. I wrote down honorable mention Hunter Henry. I also put Evan Ingram as my second honorable mention, just because. Just can you finish the season? That's all it is. It's not about their skill. Just finish the season, please.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, no, Eric Ebron, great pick. It's just a classic case of a guy just not living up to the expectations that you have for him when you drafted him. He was profiled to be like a top 5 to top 10 tight end in the NFL. He's been more in that 15 range for most of his career. So my last player is a defensive player. And I don't know. I think this choice is not too obvious. I picked Richard Sherman on the 49ers. Okay. He had a good regular season last year, but if you remember, he started getting roasted in the playoffs and especially in the Super Bowl. And I just after that, and they didn't really make any moves at the cornerback position. It seems like he's going to come in as their starting corner. And I think this is a year of like, are you still an elite cornerback or not? Because you didn't look like an elite cornerback in the postseason. And I'm not saying it's not the end of the world to get burnt by Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill burns everyone.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think it's fair to start wondering after kind of some of the performances in the postseason last year. It's just, that was more of a gut call to me. I'm sure there could have been other guys, and maybe it's because I'm a 49ers fan, I'm looking at them. But I just looked at Richard Sherman as like, I just look at, are you the weak link on the 49ers defense right now?
Yeah, I mean, Richard Sherman to me was a good candidate to move to like free safety, because it does look like he's lost a step. I mean, I think he had it was a Achilles injury a few years ago.
Yep.
And he lost a step. And I think that he has the intelligence. He has Ed Reed like intelligence out there. So, he's not as physically imposing as Ed Reed was, or other strong safeties. But I think as a free safety, I think that he could use that intelligence and just work especially the younger quarterbacks. I think he would have tremendous success. But
yeah, I just think he's more of a rotational cornerback, and that's, as a 49ers fan, I feel like, or rotational defensive back, whether it's corner, safety, whomever, wherever. Nickel. I kind of wish the 49ers had drafted or signed an upper echelon cornerback, but maybe he just wasn't available.
Yeah. So my defensive player to round this out, who's on the hottest seat for the next NFL season coming up. My defensive player, we picked one defensive player. My guy is actually also a former Seahawk. I don't know if you can call him that. It's present and soon to be former Seahawk. Jadeveon Clowney.
Oh,
And
if he's going to be on the team, has anyone signed him yet?
No, I keep reading that the Jets are interested in him, but I mean, if that's the case, I wouldn't have even picked him because that would have been the end right there. I wouldn't even say he has a chance to get off the hot seat because it just would have been that hot seat would have gotten cold real quick. And Jadeveon Clowney, I mean, after that incredible tackle he had on that poor Michigan running back who will ever be immortalized, and he's been on the Texans, and he's just kind of underwhelmed with his performance. And last year, I mean, at least on the Texans, he had 9.5 sacks, 9 sacks on his last 2 years, and he only had 3 sacks last year on the Seahawks with 31 tackles, and he had 1 interception, and he did have a touchdown return, so that was something. But overall, I mean, for a guy who's as physically imposing as he is, for a guy with all you talk about tangibles, I mean, 6'5", 255, he's big, he's strong, he's fast, and it seems like he just kind of takes it easy. It's just sort of like he reminds me of Joel Embiid on defense. Like, it's just kind of like he has, if he really put his mind to it, he'd be an unstoppable force. But because he kind of just takes a back seat sometimes and lets other people kind of do the dirty work, he kind of just he's been gliding along on talent alone. And as we've seen in the NFL, talent alone can only get you so far. You need the work ethic to match with that. Yeah, and the guys that do both of those things are the superstars and the ones that make the Hall of Fame.
That's a good call. And when you add the fact that he's demanding, like he could already have been on a team, but he's demanding like such, I don't know what the number is, but he wants to be one of the highest paid defensive players in the game. I do know that.
Yeah, so he thinks he's good enough, but he hasn't proven it. You have to prove it. And
I think if I'm an NFL team, I'm worried about signing him, and does he become Albert Hainsworth? One of these really bad signings on the defensive end where you look, this guy really only had 1 good year, and you give him all this money, and then what happens? So I would not be lining up to sign him. I'd be waiting to just wait him out. Like, do you want to play football? Okay, well, here we got a spot for you if you want to get paid. Right. But I think it's a good call, as he's been underwhelming, and we're looking kind of for him to have that dominant superstar season. I think he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft, and the number 2 pick, Khalil Mack, has had a far better career.
Yeah, on arguably a lesser talented couple teams.
Yeah,
and so well, I guess we'll see. So, all right, well, that'll do it. You can follow us along, and with all kinds of conversations like these all the time on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify. We're part of the iHeartRadio podcasting lineup, and proudly so. Twitter, our Twitter handle is at the BW Pod. Our email address, the Benchwarmerz podcast at yahoo.com. Benchwarmerz with a Z. So follow us along, and we're going to keep cranking out these shows for you. Hopefully they're well received. So for Jose Ortiz, I am Lou Ruggieri, and that'll do it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.